Welcome back to Season 4 of the Sober Motivation Podcast. Join me, Brad, each week as my guests and I share incredible and powerful sobriety stories. We're here to show sobriety is possible, one story at a time. Let's go. On this episode of the podcast, we are joined by Dean McDermott, who shares his rocky road to sobriety. He opens up about his traumatic childhood and his rise to fame. Over the years, Dean has had numerous failed attempts at sobriety, and it wasn't until he was willing to surrender that things could change. And this is Dean's story on the Sober Motivation Podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Sober Motivation Podcast. Today we've got Dean with us. Dean, how are you?
I'm good. I'm okay. Let me rephrase it. I'm okay. We got to be honest about our feelings, right? So I'm just okay today. Some things, life is life in a little bit.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I'm with you. You on that, man. We talked before, so we know where. You have an idea of where things are at. What was it like for you growing up?
Growing up was interesting. I'm from Toronto, Canada, and my dad was an alcoholic, and my mom was a normie. We grew up in government housing, so the Canadian hood. So things started out interesting right from jump. I like to do trauma work with some of my clients that I work with in recovery. And, after doing my fourth step, I wanted to go deeper into, my resentments, my character defects, and of course, where they came from. So I went all the way back and started looking at traumas. And I completely forgot about the very first trauma. The day I was born, November 16th, 1966, dead, along with my mother. And they brought us back, right? They brought us back to life. And my mother suffered severe amnesia from it and had to spend 6 months in the hospital. So I was sent home to my three older sisters who were just babies themselves. My oldest sister was 12, 13, and my dad was in jail. So right out of the gate, I lost that imprinting with mom and was sort of put into a house sort of chaos, and dad wasn't around. So parents are supposed to make us feel protected, safe, and loved. So that wasn't there. So that flipped me into fear right away before I was even cognizant of it, right? So the base of fear grew and grew as I got older. And so I was constantly in fight, flight, or freeze, which is an incredibly uncomfortable place to be. I was walking around like this, a fear of judgment, fear of getting physically hurt, fear of never being loved, fear of not being successful, fear of not being intelligent, these fears. So I was really uncomfortable as a kid. I didn't want to be on the planet because I thought, if this is life, I don't want to have any part of it. So at age 8, I started having these 8 or 9 suicidal ideations, because if life feels like this, I don't want to be a part of it. And lucky for me, I didn't know how to take my life. And when I was 12, our hockey team won the championship. It was Italian neighborhood surrounding the government housing. So a lot of my teammates were Italian. So we went back to this one player's house, and they put on this big Italian feast. And then after that, dad brought out the grappa, which is Italian moonshine, basically. And we started doing shots. So that very first shot, all those fears just washed away. Just as it burned on the way up and I became flush, everything just escaped my body. The fear of judgment, the fear of failure, the fear of not being loved. And, I came out of my shell. I was like, this is the guy I want to be. I was funny. I think I even danced with a lampshade on my head. And I was like, oh, this is the guy I want to be. Right? Until I got home and just painted the house with Italian food, throwing up everywhere. And I was like, okay, I'm never doing that again. And just continued, to trudge through life uncomfortable. 3 days before my 15th birthday, I came home from school. It was just my mom and I at this point, and she died sitting right next to me of a pulmonary embolism. And I tried to resuscitate her, but she died instantly. So my whole world the bottom of my world completely fell out. And I just froze, right? I was so full of fear at this point that I just froze. I stopped everything. I stopped school. I stopped pursuing my hockey career. I wanted to play in the NHL. Just everything stopped. And I started blackout drinking at 16, because now I had all this free will too. Like, the center of my universe was gone. So I kicked around with two of my older sisters, and then I was out on my own since I was 17 and just continued to blackout drink because it was my coping mechanism, right? This is my coping skill was, putting booze and drugs. I started experimenting with hallucinogenics, and that led to cocaine and then opiates. And there I was off on a 41-year run. So having fun, don't get me wrong, I had some fun. It's funny, an old timer said, if you didn't have fun doing drugs, then you got robbed. You got robbed. You weren't doing it right. But it was fun until it wasn't, I hear that all the time, they worked until they didn't. And it's so true. Just like anything now, like I put down drugs and alcohol, but I can pick up, another shopping, for instance, or I could pick up anger. I could keep substituting one drug for another, whether it's something physically I do or something emotionally. So I was ripping and running for 41 years. And in about 30 of those years, I would try to get clean and sober.
Yeah.
To no avail.
What did that look like, though? Walk us through, if you can remember, too, of those earlier days of, maybe giving things a try.
Yeah, I was 26, 27.
Yeah.
And I had a problem because that's when cocaine use really kicked in hard. And my first wife at the time knew someone who was in the program, and it was AA. And I was like, okay, but I don't have a problem with alcohol. I'm having a problem with cocaine. I didn't put the two together. It's the same disease, right?
Yeah.
And again, being in, full-blown ego, flight from reality, self-seeking, the smartest guy in the room, all our traits, right? I was full-blown in those, and I fought against it. I'd go to meetings, but I was like, this is a cult. This is really weird. How the hell do these 12 steps by reading a book and writing some shit down going to keep me clean and sober? I don't get it. And my problem is cocaine. So you guys talk about alcohol. I don't have a problem. So much so that I got kicked out of what I was trying to make my home group because, I went off on the secretary telling him that he was full of shit, that I'm not an alcoholic and blah, blah, blah. So then that continued, like I said, for 30 years. Just trying to do the same thing and trying to do it my way, right?
Yeah.
And then, step 2 and 3, where the God higher power thing is introduced, I was having nothing to do with because God had just taken my mother away when I was 15 and gave me this, raging alcoholic father. Like, what kind of a loving God would do that? So I had nothing to do with God whatsoever. Didn't want to touch it. So again, giving my disease a lot of things to get in my ear about and lie about. I have this disease that lies to me in my own voice. So, it just excuses. And I'd get a week, I'd go out, I'd get 8 months, I'd go out, I'd get a month. I just kept relapsing, burning things down. I had a very successful career in Canada, and I was buying properties. Like I was a big fish in a small pond in Toronto, and it got me a green card, right? These Extraordinary Ability Act in the immigration law got me, and my family at the time, my first wife and my son, a green card. So I moved to LA, and I started to destroy everything again. I was making great inroads, establishing myself in Hollywood and really starting to get noticed. Because again, I went from a big fish in a small pond to a small fish in a really big pond, but I was starting to make inroads. And, there were problems in the marriage, but, putting alcohol on top of that just made things worse. So I did a movie in Ottawa, and that's where I met Tori. And, we fell in love. It literally was love at first sight. And off we were, She was married, I was married, both in unhappy marriages, and we found this love and excitement for each other. So it's party time. It's on. So we had a lot of fun together. And, she reeled it in because it was like, okay, that was fun. Now let's get back to normal life. And I was like, no, this is great. This is great, especially going from not being known to like overnight knowing everybody knows who I am. And now all of a sudden I'm a celebrity.
Yeah.
I'm a celebrity with the disease of addiction, and people are just giving me shit. Anything I wanted. I could drink in restricted places. People were giving me drugs, cars, motorcycles, clothes, you name it. It's so funny when you become famous, people just send you stuff. So stuff just shows up at your door. So this is great because that's what I wanted. I just always wanted more because I was trying to fill that hole in my soul. Right. So I had all this great stuff given to me, and it meant nothing. It meant absolutely nothing to me because I meant nothing to me. I didn't, and I couldn't see that at the time, right? Because it just kept coming in. And it wasn't until things sort of slowed down and I started to destroy my career by pushing it away, not showing up and doing the right thing. I started to just push away my career. And I was like, okay, well, I'm really successful with Tori and the things we do together. So I lost my autonomy, right? I wasn't Dean McDermott anymore. I was, Tori Spelling's boyfriend, Tori Spelling's fiance, Tori Spelling's husband, Mr. Tori Spelling. So I lost my autonomy and I was like, okay, well, we'll continue to work forever and make a ton of money doing reality shows or TV shows or whatever. And that's just not the case. So when things slowed down and I have no career anymore, because I was implicit in burning it down, I just kept on that path. I was really good at building myself back up. And then when I got successful again, I was like, I'm miserable still, right? I'm miserable because inside I'm hollow. I'm a shell of a person. So, if this is what being sober is like, fuck that. I'm going to go get loaded. So again, I'd burn everything down again, build it up. And it wasn't till this last one that I had nothing in me to build back up. I had no motivation, no desire, no passion. I was just a shell of a person. And I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted from life anymore. I was just a dad taking kids to school and picking them up, making dinner, doing homework, miserable, wearing the same thing for weeks on end because I didn't give a shit, right? Closet again, full of beautiful clothes that were given to me or that I bought, price tag still on them, never worn, because that's how I felt about myself. I don't deserve to wear nice things. I'm just a piece of shit taking my kids to school, being a half-assed dad, a horrible dad, emotionally, spiritually. I mean, I was just checking a box. Take them to school, check. Go home, be miserable, pick them up, feed them, start drinking, start drugging, put them to bed, start all over again till I got to a point where I was getting angry that I woke up. I didn't want, we got 5 beautiful kids and a wife down the hall, and I don't want to be on this planet. That's where this disease took me.
Yeah.
So I found myself at 56. Again, I don't know what I'm doing. And I really, surrender was the biggest thing for me. And I think it's the biggest thing for a lot of us because we're so used to living in addiction and it's easy, right? It's all we've ever known, especially as far as coping skills go, right? It's all we've ever known. So it's easy to stay in this lane, right? And we know where it ends, jails, institutions, and death. And this other road goes on for infinity. And we don't know what's at the end of it. But it's a lot better than for, this other path we're on. So
yeah,
I didn't know how to get into that lane, right? I finally surrendered and said, okay, clearly I don't know how to be a husband. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to be a son, a brother, a coworker, a friend, or a normal human being, So I threw in the towel. I threw in the towel and I was like, okay, yeah, I need help. I can't do this anymore. And I went into treatment. And like we talked about earlier, I made a deal with myself that I'm doing this 1,000%. I'm all in because you're either all in or you're all out. You can't be a little bit pregnant. You can't have a foot in each one and expect things to change. So I jumped in. I went to Harmony Place here in Woodland Hills, which is an incredible facility. And that's where the work began, where I started to figure out, how do I do this thing called life? Because I'm like, okay, I'm starting at ground zero. I've surrendered, right? I've surrendered to the fact that I don't know what I'm doing. So what do I do? Right?
Interesting. Really interesting. You mentioned that there too, though. You go into the center with sort of the question of how do I do life, as opposed to, and maybe you're in line with this, what I'm going to say next, and maybe not. I always thought that drugs and alcohol were my big problem, but I
Me too.
realized I had sobered up, and my life was maybe even more chaotic at those times than when I was
Absolutely.
wrapped up with the stuff. And
Yeah.
I liked how you put that, as to go into this to figure out where's the disconnect there, as far as like how to live life, and why does drugs and alcohol always wind up being my solution. But it's good in your story, we get a clear picture of it, because early on you had a lot of stuff happen. Drugs and alcohol really work so well. It really works so well to make all of what you shared about all those fears, which I can relate to, of being so uncomfortable in my own skin in life and trying to, do what I'm supposed to do, make friends. I was just never felt like I could get any of it right. Drugs and alcohol, same time I went to my first party, I mean, I was getting phone numbers, I was talking to girls, everything
Right.
came together. And I was like, how could life be any different? I mean, this is great. What took so long for us to meet? And,
Yes.
but I love that, wrapping all that up there. I love how you mentioned that too. I'm really interested, though, as well, on top of that, your approach to surrender, because you sharing your story there with us that you tried this, over a 30-year span or so of going to meetings, trying it out, things getting in the way, getting some time, going back to how things were. I mean, what does that surrender feel like and look like differently maybe for you this time, or even if it was involved previous times?
A great weight was lifted off my shoulders when I surrendered. Because again, I still thought I knew everything. I was the smartest guy in the room and everybody was an idiot. A great weight was lifted off my shoulder because I didn't have to wear that mask of being super intellectual and the life of the party and the know-it-all and charming and all that shit. Like, I could actually just sit in the fact I didn't know anything. There was a great relief in that. It's great. It's something today that I talk about in my groups, is it's okay to not know, right? It's okay. If someone's going to judge you for not knowing something, then again, that's their side of the street, right? But I can't take it personally because it's going to hurt me because I'm so sensitive, right? So I love that. I love being able to say, I don't know. Because you could ask me, say, hey, Dean, how do you build a microphone? Well, let me tell you. And I bullshit my way through making a microphone. I have no idea how to make a microphone, right? But I needed to be right. I needed to feed my ego, and I needed to raise my low self-esteem. So I was always on. So now I'm just like, yeah, I don't know how to make my microphone, but I have this $1,000 little computer in my hand. Maybe let's look it up. Right. So I can evolve, so I can keep learning. Right. In my addiction, again, I keep saying this, I thought I knew everything. So if I know everything, I don't have to continue to learn. So to me, that stifles growth. Right. When we stop learning, we stop evolving. So the surrender was a great relief, but it was scary as hell. Because again, all right, I threw in the towel and I admitted I don't know what I'm doing. Where do I go from here? And I guess I'm lucky because I had those 30 years of going in and out. Maybe I learned some things from osmosis, and maybe it was my age that, again, I still didn't see, like I thought, I went into it thinking like a lot of people do, if I can just do 30 days of not drinking or not drugging, I'm going to be okay. I just need to, dry out. But I did go in with I need to learn how to live life. They had a really good mental health program, and that's what attracted me to Harmony Place. So we really started to attack that first, right? Once I was in and stabilized. And so they came at me with, the drugs and alcohol are the remedy to my problems. I could put them down, but I'm left with this. So we need to straighten this out. And that's when it really clicked for me. And it only took a week and a half, 2 weeks for me to get that. And again, I think it might have been a combination of my age and doing the time I did do in the first fellowship.
Yeah.
Maybe it was my higher power. I don't know, which I still wasn't having anything to do with. I wasn't having anything to do with. But then again, I had to keep reminding myself. I made a deal with myself that I'm going to take direction. I'm going to be honest, open-minded, and willing. So I'm like, okay, I'll put a pinky toe in. And just through routine and working the steps and the spiritual principles and just hitting my knees every morning, whether I believed it or not, because I was like, okay, I'm going to, again, open-minded and willing, and I'm going to take direction from others. It's okay, well, that's what they're telling me to do. So I'll do it.
Yeah. Check it out.
Nothing changes if nothing changes. So I'm like, okay, well, let's give it a shot. And so I used my mother, right? She's my angel. So I used her as my higher power. And I heard this amazing share at a meeting about this gentleman after 20 years of sobriety became quadriplegic. And he's an atheist. And the 16 years he has since the accident, he's got 36 years in total, but the 16 years since the accident, I've never had a more spiritual, fulfilling life. And I was like, wow. Because we all looked at each other like our jaws dropped. Like, how do you do that? It was a surfing accident. So he was active. I'm like, wow. How do you get that spiritual as an atheist after that happens to you? And his God was Gus, glorious universal spirit. So I ran with that for a while, Gus, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot say. So every time I would refer to God, it was Gus. And so I started to get some traction with that and started to incorporate that into my program. That's when the steps really kicked in for me. It started to make sense. And I just kept doing, the same thing over and over again until finally it's just, boom, just like, I have God in my life. What am I fighting? I know I need some kind of faith in this program. I need faith to fight fear. I need faith in others as well. And I started to discover that with, finding a home group and really reaching out and connecting with others. I was like, oh, this is faith. This is how faith works. And started to see the signs, right? My eyes were open to seeing the signs of a higher power present in my life, where before I would think they were coincidence, right? It was like, that was just a coincidence. That's a coincidence that I spun down the frozen highway, spinning about 8 times with 6 grams of cocaine in my pocket and didn't hit anybody and hurt anybody. That's just a coincidence. That was a higher power in my life.
Yeah. It's so interesting though. You mentioned that too, the higher power element, people plug into. I went to a, treatment center many moons ago, and as always, people, they're different backgrounds and everything. People come into the mix, right? One guy had a trouble with faith, and one of the counselors there was like, do you check that the floor is there when you get out of bed? And the guy was like, no, I don't know if any of us check to see if the floor is there. We just have faith that there's going to be a floor when we roll out of bed. And I thought it was just a great way to open the door to maybe the next level of things. But it is something to, I'm wondering too, back to how you shared sort of, becoming famous at that level, and, how that changes maybe the dynamics in your life, and then kicking off with the partying, but then other people scaling it back, but you wanting to keep things going. I mean, did you recognize a change in your life too at that time when things started to pick up for you in that direction?
No, because I was so far in it. I was a kid in a candy store, right? Every day something would show up at the door. So it just fed into, hey, I must be doing something right.
Yeah.
And it gave, that voice in my head going, yeah, well, mortgage is paid. You're getting all this stuff. People, this is when our show was big, Tori and Dean, Home Sweet Hollywood. We were like this power couple. People look up to you. Couples want to be like you, right? So there was no way that I was looking at any sort of problem because I didn't think it existed.
How are you keeping it together with all the stuff going on? And then were you able to put it in compartments of, this is sort of party time, this is time when we show up to do that, or did it all blend together?
It all blended in. There's so many interviews that I did, the vodka soda and the coffee cup. We do these electronic press tours where, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but, we just have a studio, we're all lit and all done up, and then they just plug us into different news outlets across the country and we talk about the show. So I constantly had a vodka soda going. I remember, I think it was a big interview. I think it was Good Morning America came to this Airbnb that we were running in our very first show, Tori Dean in Love, and just blatantly sitting there with that vodka soda, the lime in it. It wasn't even hiding it at that point. And I was like, you arrogant son of a bitch. This is big. Like, Good Morning America. Who gets to do that to begin with? And we're at that level. So that's self-destruction, right? That's burning things down. And it wasn't until I surrendered and got into treatment that I started to learn that this self-destruction, burning things down, was all, how I felt about myself, that I didn't deserve it once I got there, right? That I'm some kind of fraud. I was waiting for them to pull back the curtain like the Wizard of Oz, right? And really see me for who I am. I'm never going to work again. People are going to see I'm a piece of shit, on and on.
Yeah.
So once I learned why I was burning things down, was I able to start looking inward and process that. And step 4, right, finding all these character defects. Then I tell the people I work with, you don't know until you know, right? You have to sit down and write them out, because we can all think that, hey, yeah, no, I have an anger issue, or hey, I'm manipulating, but it's just kicking around in our head. It's not until we put a pen to paper that it's real, I believe, right? And it's very cathartic to get it out of here, to get it on paper and then share it with another person. It becomes real. So now I know what they are. And I know, when I get a shortcoming and I'm heading into a character defect, that I can stomp it out. As before, I would just run into it full force. I'd run into the burning building while everybody's running out.
The Kool-Aid man. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, that's why I think the rehab is so beneficial for so many, right? But one of the biggest things I see that it helps people with, all the stuff you're talking about, but it also removes us from the environment that we're in. Like, getting removed from that environment that we're, is causing a lot of the same stuff that we're used to, can really, change things to direction and give us a different perspective. And then also the professionals and the groups and the support and the meetings and everything else adds up onto it. But sometimes if people are stuck in the same environment where all the chaos and all the messes, it's hard to get them out of there to really focus on other things that are going on. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that. And then I had something else I was curious about too.
Okay. There was a stretch there that about 60-70% of the people in treatment were from Oklahoma, because there's a real meth epidemic in Oklahoma and in that part of the world, but particularly like a lot of people from Oklahoma. And, our literature talks about people, places, and things. So it's great to get them out of that environment and they start to see it. Right? They can start to see that, hey, I can't be around people who are holding or using or drinking. I can't. And I help them set up boundaries, right?
Yeah.
And it's really hard, because when they start to get it, when the light goes off, they have to go back home. That breaks my heart, because I know they're walking into a minefield, right? So we try to armor them up as best as we can, because they're going back into that. And a lot of people come out from different states want to stay in California. They want to do a geographical, because they know they've learned enough in recovery that they're in trouble when they go back, even if they create boundaries with these people, places, and things, because it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's rampant. And that's not to say that it's not here and on every corner here in California, but, there's so many other factors too, socioeconomics. In a lot of people can't get out because they can't afford to move to the next state. So that's the heartbreaking thing of it, is to do all this great work, armor them up, and to go back and, and then see them a month later. But that's a good thing, is I can see them a month later, because some people don't come back, right? They never make it back in.
Yeah.
So that's the heartbreaking thing about working in recovery. But the rewards, like I said, when the lights go off on someone and it starts to click. It's just, that's the most amazing thing, because I know I was there and it didn't click.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I fought against it for so long. So when the surrender happens, man, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. It's almost like time collapses in those moments to where it's, thank goodness, don't have to, maybe some people hopefully don't have to spend, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years trying to figure it out, and can kind of get, not that it's like, linear journey straight up from there. It's, you have your footing, right? You've kind of see the light in that sense that this path is not going to get us to where we want to be. It's complete destruction on this too. I'm wondering too, like towards leading up to you going to the treatment and everything, I mean, were there any events or anything, and what did your life look like directly before that to say, for you to throw your hands up and make the call? Or
Oh yeah, thank you for asking, because I just skipped over that. It was horrible. It was horrible. Yeah, I was so toxic, and I was so full of venom and anger and self-loathing and hatred, and the list goes on and on. That's all I had to give. So I gave that to Tori. I gave that to all my kids. I gave that to anybody who was around me. So I was a horrible human being. I was a horrible human being. That's when I knew I had a problem. I had a real problem, because I was just in attack mode all the time. Defensive, condescending, egotistical, crude, nasty. And I was destroying this beautiful family. I was hurting these beautiful kids. And there was one particular incident that another argument broke out. And I was just in a fit of white rage. And I, was raging against everybody. And I was so angry and hurt by what I had done. And I was so hurt too, because there was a lack of, the relationship was waning. It was falling apart. And I was hurt by that. So I went out and I went upstairs, loaded, and I put out this post that Tori and I are divorcing. Unbeknownst to her, I was like, okay, I'll show you. You're not hearing me? You're not hearing me? Yeah, you're going to hear me now. And, I woke up the next day to my phone blowing up, and it was all over the place that we're divorcing. And that's when I knew I fucked up, because my kids were like, Dad, how could you do that? Our friends are going to see that. It instilled a whole bunch of fear in them that they didn't know what the next day, it was on a Friday, so they didn't know what their Monday was going to look like when they went back to school, because it was everywhere, right? And it really hurt them. And it really hurt them that I wouldn't even talk to them about it first before I did something like that. But I was so wrapped up in my anger, ego, and self-loathing that I was just like, fuck it. Yeah. And, took a handful of Ambien that night too to go to sleep, and was like, well, it's not going to matter if I don't wake up. All of this doesn't matter. And so when I woke up, oh man, you talk about feeling the floor. I got out of bed and I felt about this tiny, about this big on the floor. And I knew I had fucked up. I knew I'd fucked up on a big scale, on a real public scale. And looking at it in hindsight, when I was in treatment, it was also a cry for help. It was a cry for help. And again, did it in the wrong way. But it led me here. It got me to here. And it got me to, recovery's got me to a much better place. Is it clowns and balloons? Am I shitting rainbows? No. But where I was, from whence I came, it's infinitely better. It's infinitely better as long as I keep showing up. I keep doing the work. I keep being of service. Yeah. I love recovery today, and I love the 12 steps. And I try to teach that to my kids. It's this beautiful filter for life. It's the other thing to teach is once you get through the 12 steps, right? You use this, I hold the book up, I say, you filter your life through this. Anything that's going on, in your day, any feeling you cop, any situation, run it through this filter of the 12 steps from 1 to 12. And by the time you're halfway through them, your issue is going to be resolved, or it's going to look like nonsense. Right.
Yeah.
It's just a great tool to learn spiritual principles and coping skills, because as I'm not sure, are you a parent?
Yeah. I have 3 kids. Yeah.
3 kids. Yeah. So I fucked up. You fucked up. We're going to continue to fuck up as parents, right? Because we have all these books on parenting, but boots on the ground is completely different story.
Yeah. True.
Right. So, my grandfather fucked up, my dad fucked up me, blah, 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 and we'll continue. But it's to what degree now, right? Yeah. If I had those coping skills that I was lacking for all those years, would I be a better father? Yeah, probably. But I'd also fuck up too, right? Because we are human. So I wish they would teach it in school, because, it's taught a 56-year-old man how to grow up and be a man.
Yeah. When I go back to my high school days and stuff, I was always getting in trouble, but I'm just like, it was just a discipline approach, discipline, out of school suspension, getting arrested, all that type of stuff. It took a lot longer for anybody to really realize there was more going on. I'm wondering too, you reflect back on all this and, share it in a way that, obviously, where things went and how they ended up for your life, but share in a way of accountability, and I'm working on it. What have you learned about yourself, since embarking on this journey?
What I've learned about myself in this journey is that my character is being revealed through recovery. I didn't know who I was, and I didn't know who I was for the longest time. And that's where, we put on all these different masks, and I'm an actor. So, I'm able to lie and bullshit my way through everything, and lie and bullshit myself through everything. That I'm learning that's not the person I was put on this planet to be. Right? I've been put on this planet to be a kind and loving human being, help others, and be of service, and just have a beautiful life. Right? But again, I have the disease of addiction, and it took me down this road. It doesn't have to end that way, right? It's teaching me that, hey, I can get back to who I'm supposed to be, and I can take accountability for all my wrongdoings, and it's okay. Because again, I'm very contrite. If I hurt you and I apologize to you, I would apologize to you for weeks, right? But I understand that, now my word means something, and if I apologize to you, you accept it and we can move on. It's just building character. It keeps revealing the character, my strength of character, my adaptability, my intelligence, my self-esteem. It just more and more gets revealed every day. So what I've learned in this is that I can grow. I can get out of this. Anybody can get out of this. There is a way out, right? But there's some work involved, and it can make me a better person. Definitely make me a better person than I was in my addiction. But for, the 40 more years, hopefully, that I have in this lifetime, I can be happy and free and enlightened and love others. Because what I've experienced doing that so far, being, having self-love and giving it away freely, what an incredible way to live. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I guess change is possible, is what I've learned from this.
Yeah, which just had me thinking too. You shared before in your story about like these highs and then burn it down, right? Hit this mountaintop. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think as humans, we have this outwardly vision of, if we reach these goals, then we'll be satisfied. And like for some people, they might be. I think those of us that struggle with addiction, it doesn't matter what it is, where it's not going to, the external things are not going to fill that internal void that we feel, right? Some people talk about a black hole or something like that, right? There's
an sized hole.
Yeah, something like that, right? So you hit these peaks and then you burn it down and then go back on this journey of building it back up, maybe thinking that, once I get here, I'll be good, and I have my, my thing is not the, that type of things. But I've had those things in my life too, where I'm just like, if I get there, of course, right? If I get that car, get that truck, whatever, blah, 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 or that relationship, you'll be good. And then every time I reflect back, I'm like, it wore off so quick, sort of the fun of it. And I relate that back to sort of my trouble with getting sober for so long. My whole life was failure. I was a convicted felon at 18. I got first time arrested at 16. I got deported from the US, got a lifetime ban back to Canada, went to jail, failed every test I ever took, was in learning centers, ADHD, doctors, psych wards, treatment.
Wow.
And I felt, I felt like such a failure that it became normal. It just became normal to just always come up short. And the idea of sobriety, I used to go to meetings when I was 18 and 19, and it was the weirdest thing. I was the youngest by, I don't know, just guess 30 years or so. And I would hear sort of how people's lives were changing. And I would always think to myself as I left there and went over to get some beer right after, is that I would think, I don't know how that life would look. It was such a foreign concept to me to have a life of no chaos and a life of a steady job and not getting fired all the time or just not showing up. And I just always find it so interesting to sort of hear different people's perspectives on what we feared about maybe a sober life, even though it's beautiful and we see it now, but maybe that feeling emotions and not being able to just hit the ejection button all the time. I mean, was anything like that for you about sort of maybe what you felt held you back from plugging in or anything?
It's funny. I was just talking to a friend of mine in the program, and he shared with me, he's just, only an addict would go to these meetings and hear how people's lives were horrible, did these 12 steps, and now their life is amazing. Only an addict would keep going to those meetings going, I don't get it. Where a normal person would go to one meeting and go, oh, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this, and go out and do it, right? But we as addicts are just like, no, I need proof it works. I need proof it works. I don't understand how reading this book and doing these 12 steps is going to help me. I need proof before I'm going to attempt it, right? And I think that kept me from it. I want to see the proof. But I was blinded to it because every meeting, there's the proof from the podium or from a share, right? And we've heard horrendous stories from doing deplorable things behind dumpsters for drug money, alcohol. And still, it's, I don't get it. You did 12 steps and your life turned around and now you own a company? Yeah, no, I need more research. There's so many things, right? There's so many things that kept me from doing it. And it was me, right? It was just self. It was fear, because we don't know what recovery looks like, because like I said, we've been running in this lane for so long. It's comfortable, right? When I feel uncomfortable or I cop a feeling, I put drugs and alcohol on it, it's fine. Even though it's worse the next day, right? Because now, I still have those same feelings, but now I have shame and guilt because I got loaded and God knows what I did. So again, I needed proof. And even I had a sponsor, and I had a sponsor for the whole whack of time, but still just couldn't, because again, I was just so into me. It was all about me. I was the mayor of Deanville. And I was omnipotent. I was godlike, even though I didn't believe in God, but I was the God of my universe. So if something just didn't jive with me or you couldn't prove it to me, it was bullshit. And if you couldn't prove it to me, then I had no use for you either. I don't know. Did that answer the question?
No. It does 100%. And I think it goes back to what I'm getting from it. I was talking with somebody else actually this morning about it. I think one of the most difficult times, and you work with people who are going through this. I've worked with people going through this for 14 years. And one of the biggest challenges is that it's so hard to say because it's a really interesting dynamic, but there's got to be some sort of level of willingness that we have to put forward. But I feel like the willingness comes from the pain that we go through, or maybe as you're saying, is like kind of the research, right? Go back out and see if it works. And it's one of the most difficult spots of supporting people on the journey, because sometimes it's like they're ready, but they're not ready, to say my way. You got to be like, so you got to get to that spot of surrender and say, the way I look at it in my life, my best thinking, my best planning, my best ideas, I mean, it got me in the worst positions in life. Yeah. And I had to get to the spot to put everything aside and say, you know what, Brad, you got yourself here and you can do a lot of incredible things in life and make a lot of cool things happen in life, but you ain't going to figure this out on your own. You're
No.
not. And I fought with that, just butted heads time and time again. It was also confusing because sometimes it would work for a little bit.
Yeah.
I would kick the drugs. I would, sober up from drinking for a little bit and then, get back into moderation, or I'm just going to dabble a little bit. And then 3 days later, boom, it's disastrous.
Burn it down again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly experienced that a lot working in recovery. And, my sponsor always says that, hopefully one day the pain will be so great that you'll finally take action. And hopefully now, with all the shit that's on the street now with fentanyl, hopefully they make it back. Right. But hopefully one day, the pain will be so great that you'll be willing to take action.
Yeah.
And again, that's what it comes down to. It's willingness to surrender, willing to be honest, willing to be open-minded, willing to work with others, willing to take direction from others, listen to predecessors.
Yeah.
It's all about willingness. But again, what's lighting the wick, right? And it's pain.
Yeah.
It's pain. And if you're not ready to light the wick on that, you haven't experienced enough pain.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Just looking towards wrapping up, twofold question for you.
Okay.
If there's anything that we missed that you want to mention, we'll start with that one, actually. Is there anything that we just haven't discussed here that you'd like to share with people listening?
I don't think we've missed anything, but I like to share with people who are listening and who are struggling. My sponsor always says that hell has an exit, right? And no matter how far down you've gotten, hell has an exit and you can get through this. And I want you to know that you're worth it. You're worth it. And life is beautiful. It really is. Life is hard as hell, but life is beautiful. And, we can get out of that hell of that life and start to experience the beauty of life and the gifts it has to give us. But, I want people to know who are showing you're worth it. Give yourself a shot. Give yourself a chance to experience that. Get out of your own way. Give yourself a chance because you're worth it. You're beautiful. I don't know however you look at evolution or God or how you made it onto this planet, but you're here for a purpose, and that is to have a beautiful life, and you're worth it. You're a beautiful human being. So I really want people to hear that, because I know for me, I was so far down the rabbit hole of being a piece of shit that I didn't want to live. And today, my life is fantastic. I went from a really big life, the 7,000 square foot houses behind gated communities and the cars and all the bells and whistles, cash and prizes, and I was miserable. And today, I can almost touch both walls of my little studio apartment here. It's 200 square feet. And, I've never been happier.
Wow.
I've right-sized my life, and I found happiness. I have everything I need, especially the relationship with my children. That's the biggest thing in my life today that I have. And I have a great relationship with my ex-wife. And, we're co-parenting and we're doing a great job. There's always a solution, right? Even in the darkest moments, darkest hours of our lives, there's always a solution. And for me, I'm that kind of addict, alcoholic. I need a program. If I don't have a program, I'm not getting loaded again. So jump in, do it for a year. Right? Jump in and do it for a year, but do it diligently, fearlessly, searchingly, right? And after a year, if you're still miserable, you can always go get a refund on your misery, because there's a plug and a liquor store in every corner, right? So that's sort of, what I like to tell people who are struggling.
Yeah.
You don't have to live like this anymore. There's a way out.
So true. I said there was only 2 questions. There might be a couple.
You liar.
I know it's brutal. That just had me thinking too, though, like, when did sort of that magic happen for you, right? Because that's something that if you're wrapped up in the mix, it's hard to believe these things, right? It's hard to believe it gets better. It's hard to believe that we could possibly turn our life around. I mean, look at the sort of the stuff you shared. And I mean, in my own story, just the wreckage of the past. Some things can't be undone, but there's forgiveness out there. And I had a really hard time realizing that. I thought Even when I got sober, I thought for sure these bridges will be burned forever with these people, and rightfully so. Like I didn't put the expectation on other people to welcome me back in their life and stuff. I was like that. Yeah, I get it, but it was so magical how over the years, it was like this no hard feelings approach to things that I never thought would be ever moved on from. So when was it like for you that, some of the magic of the whole thing started to happen?
It was this go around. Go around again at age 56. It's just a bad look. And, I got to a point where I didn't want to live. So something had to change. So again, surrender is a big part of my story. And through that, things slowly started to change. It doesn't change overnight, right? But it takes time and consistency. So if I'm willing, again, there's that word willing. If I'm willing to keep showing up, doing the groups, doing the work, going to meetings, doing the 12, my life will change. And for me, it came in little bits. For some others, it's boom, it's a big moment. But once I got a higher power in my life and I attached that spirituality to the steps, that's when the magic really started to happen for me, because I wasn't going through and just checking boxes. There was something else connected to it aside from the words, Admitted I was powerless over drugs and alcohol and my life had become unmanageable. Once I started to look at it from a spiritual perspective and how it was affecting me spiritually, emotionally, and mentally and physically, was I able to expand upon it? So that's when things really started to cook. That's when things really started to make sense and my life started to change. But again, slip back into that real easily. I could slip back into character defects really easily and push that away, which recently happened to me. I was having a bit of a spiritual issue lately. And by being open to seeing the signs and the gifts and the lessons that aren't so on the nose, right, was I able to get back to it. We talked earlier, I had this young man put in my life who is suffering really badly, tragedies, deaths in his immediate family, and he doesn't want to live. That was my higher power, putting that young man into my life to show me that, things could always be worse, but you could be of service to this young man. You could give of what you have for this young man. It's no coincidence that it just happened to be, I was his very first group being in this residential detox. It was at 11 o'clock my time. It could have been a number of other facilitators, but it happened to me. It happened to me, and this young man and I connected, and that, fed my spirituality. And it's things like that really help blossom, the recovery for me. That moment that you talked about, that you asked me about, of when things really started to work. Things like that. It's continuous now. It's not just, it starts off in little bits in the beginning when we're trying to get our legs underneath us, but just daily now, again, if we're willing to open our eyes and look for the lessons and the signs, they're there, and it just feeds you. That's what I love about this job. I'm of service every day. I have my commitments and I'm of service at my meetings, but I get to do this every day. And, that just, these clients help me more than they'll ever know. And that's how the program works, right?
Yeah, it's a full circle. It's those full circle moments or full circle days where it's like everything just truly makes sense. And, it's so beautiful, I think, when people who go through it too get into a position to give back, because then it's sort of putting forward our experience and maybe pushing it forward to help somebody else. And it creates that, that fire to keep going, right? And it's tough at times too, like working with people. It's really tough because not everybody gets it in the times that we work with them. I used to work with teenagers years ago. I did it for 6 years. I worked residentially with teenagers, and, it was really challenging. And, a handful of guys here and there would, the lights would come on. They would see it for what it was. And then a lot of people, our job was planting seeds and hoping throughout their life that they would be watered. But it's really tough when you spend 6 months with somebody and you're like, come on, you want them to just be rocking and rolling. You see where this ship is headed, right? You want everybody to do well. Yeah. Well, thank you, Dean, so much for jumping on here. And
my pleasure, man. My pleasure. I could talk for another 2 hours with you, brother. This was great. I love recovery, man. I could talk about it all day.
Yeah.
I really could.
Beautiful, man.
It's-
Oh, one last question for you. Who's taking down the cup this year?
I would love to see Edmonton. I
Yeah.
really would. Yeah, I really would love to see Edmonton. I grew up with the Gretzky Messier dynasty, right? And I would love to see them. And it'd be great for Connor McDavid. I mean, one of the greatest players in the sport today. All his hard work, and he's stuck through thick and thin, right? He's stuck with that team. And that means a lot, right? That's character. That's character right there. So I'd really like to see that for him. I'm a Calgary fan too. Even though I'm from Toronto, right? I got off that bandwagon a long time ago. Too many heartaches. I was like, okay, no, I can't do that anymore. So I became a Calgary fan, and obviously now I'm a Los Angeles Kings fan. But the thing I liked about when I jumped ship, I liked Edmonton and Calgary because they were small market teams that played with heart, right? And to me, that hockey's all about heart. And I just love how they'd show up and just put it all out on the ice night after night, no matter where they were in the standings. So I'd love to see either one of them. I don't know. I watched Calgary last night, but I wasn't paying attention. They lost in overtime to Dallas. But where are they in the standings? Are they in a wild card or they're in?
No, I think they're around the wild card spot.
The wild card spot, yeah.
I think so. Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to see them get in.
Yeah, good.
So yeah, there's Oilers for the
cup. Yeah, pull it off this year. All right, cool. Well, thank you, Dean. You have a good rest of your day. A good week.
You too. Man. You too, brother. And again, thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Well, there it is, everyone. Another incredible episode here on the podcast. Be sure to send Dean over a message. If you enjoyed this episode or could take away anything from it, I know he would love to hear from you. If you haven't left a review for the podcast yet and you're enjoying all of these episodes, jump over to Apple or Spotify and leave a review. Written review on Apple is dynamite, and a 5 stars over on Spotify is incredible too. So thank you guys as always for hanging out, and I'll see you on the next one.